Hello and welcome back. So in this particular session, what I'll be showing you all is how do you compute nominal GDP and what are they? Nominal and real GDP, right? So what is GDP? So GDP is basically all the goods and services that is produced within the country. Okay, so what is it? It is basically all the goods and services produced within the country. Okay, so it's all the goods and services that is produced within the country, right? So we all know that it's all about the goods and services that is produced within the country. So what kind of goods and services, right? So basically we are going to talk about two different kind of product, right? So that are burger and pizza, right? So let's say a country A, right? So it could be A, B, C, whatever, right? So country A produces two different kind of products in a year, pizza and burger, and then we have the year 2011 and 2012, right? So in the first year it produces 10 quantity of pizza and 10 is the market value for that pizza, right? So it produces 10 burgers and its price is 20, right? Similarly, in the year 12, it produces 10 and then the price is 11. Quantity for burger is 10 and then it produces 22 or the market value is 22, right? So, whenever we are talking about GDP, what is GDP? So, GDP is the sum of all the goods that are produced within the country, right? So, sum of all the goods that are produced within the country. So, it is basically computed with the help of market value. Okay, so it does not take into account the intermediate goods, but it is the market value, right? So the market value for pizza is 10 into 10 100 plus the 10 into 20 200. Okay, so that's the total GDP will be combined of these two different outputs that are being produced from the country. Okay, so let's do it. So the GDP for 2011 will be, so 10 into 10 plus 10 into 20, that will give us 100 plus 200, that will be 300, right? So if you are not satisfied with the calculation, please do go ahead and do it yourself. I think it will be 300, right? What about for 2012, right? So since in 2012 as well, what has happened? We have produced the same quantity, but what has happened? The prices have increased, right? So it has increased by 1 unit in terms of $1, whatever. In terms of 2012, in the burger, it has increased by $2 rupees, whichever currency you want to use, right? So what has happened is basically the GDP has increased by how much? So 10 into 11 plus 10 into 22. So that will be basically 220 plus 110, right? So that will be 330, I guess. Let's do the computation as well. Yeah? 110 plus 220, that will be 330. Right. So if you see over here, what has happened is that 330 divided by 300 into 100, right? So it has increased by 10%. I think it should have increased by 10%. Yeah, 330, yeah, 30 divided by 300 will be 10%, right? So what has happened? The change over here is 10%, right? So how do you get the change? It's basically 330 minus 300 divided by 300. Yeah. Whenever you're computing change, that's how you compute it. 330 minus 300 divided by 300 into 100. That will give us 10%. So the GDP has increased by 10%, right? So in this case, what we are doing is that we are using the quantity and then multiplying it with the prices, right? So these prices have increased because you see like the yesterday's price, let's say yesterday something costed, let's say X, right? Today it's costing Y. Why is that? Because of inflation, right? So in this case as well, the inflation has kicked in. That's why the GDP has increased, right? It's increased to 330, right? And then if you see the quantity, it has not changed, right? So this is like the total output within the country has not changed, right? So, but GDP is supposed to measure the output as well, right? So it's the total goods and services that is produced within the country, right? So why is the prices basically inflating the figure, right? So that's why we use something called as real GDP. In this case, what we do, we take a base year and then we keep the prices constant based on the base year. Okay, so let's say the prices was 10 in the year to 2011, right? So in the year 12 as well, we keep the prices 10. Okay, so if the prices were same like yesterday, then how much has the output increased by, right? So that's what we want to measure in this case, right? So as you can see, the prices have been kept same, so it should be, I'm so sorry, it should have been quantity into price. Yeah, it should have been quantity into price. So the prices have been kept constant. Okay, in real GDP we keep the prices constant and we just measure the changes in the quantity. So similarly we compute the GDP for this as well. So it will be 100, or let's just do this in this way, 10 into 10 plus how many burger quantity is 10, and then burger price is 20, so that will give us 300, right? So far so good, right? And then in the second year as well, what do? We multiply the quantity into price for pizza and then we multiply it for the burger as well, right? So in this case as well we are getting 300, right? So as you can see, the change is zero, right? So it's 0%. Something divided by zero will always amount to zero, right? So we do the same thing again, 300 minus this year minus last year, divide by last year into 100%, but this the change is 0%, right? So why is that happening? Because see the quantity over here. So in the earlier nominal GDP, what was happening? The prices was increasing, right? So this basically inflated the GDP figure. Okay, so there was an upward pressure on the price, or the upward pressure due to price. Okay, so the quantity was basically same, so there was no pressure from the quantity side. The prices was basically changing, right? So if you see in this year it is 10, it is 11, so there was an upward pressure. So same thing for the burger as well, there was an upward pressure, right? Whereas in terms of real GDP it was constant, so there is no effect of prices when you're measuring the GDP, right? So the prices has been neglected, right? So or it's not basically required, right? So as you can see, the prices, if you keep the prices constant, then only you can actually measure the changes in output only, right? So that's what we want to basically measure, right? So whenever you're asking somebody about, let's say someone talks about GDP and then they say what is the nominal GDP and then real GDP, right? So you always listen to something called as real GDP, not the nominal GDP, because it has been inflated because of the price. Okay, so it's basically taking account into the present current prices. Okay, but we want the GDP to be actually measuring the output, not being inflated by the changes in prices. Okay, so yeah, that's the real difference. As you can see, nominal GDP is showing a increase of 10%, whereas the real GDP or the actual change in output of the country was only 0%. Okay, so always consider this kind of calculation whenever they are talking about GDP. Always think of it from this way. Okay, so that's it for this video. I hope you did enjoy it. If you do, please do like, share and subscribe, whatever you want to do. Until next time, take care. Bye bye.